Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I didn't expect that night to change everything. It started like any other Tuesday, quiet, dull, predictable. I came home around 7, worn out from another 12-hour shift and 2 hours of traffic, thinking I might find something close to peace waiting for me. That used to be the case, once. Home used to mean something. The house was already dim when I stepped in, the only light coming from the kitchen where she stood at the counter, slicing vegetables in the exact robotic way you'd expect from someone preparing food more out of habit than intention. She hadn't responded to my last 2 texts, and the call I'd made before getting off the highway had gone straight to voicemail. Still, I told myself she was probably just busy. I set my bag down by the shoe rack, loosened my tie, and tried to shake the day off my shoulders. Traffic was murder, I offered, my voice casual, deliberately light. No response. She didn't even look up. Just kept slicing. I walked closer, trying again. What are we having? Still nothing. Then, just as I was about to repeat the question, she put the knife down, rinsed her hands, and finally turned to face me. Her eyes were flat. Not angry. Not upset. Just blank. I'd seen that look before, in boardrooms and breakups, but never in my own kitchen. We need to talk, she said. 4 words. Just 4. But in a marriage, you learn that some phrases are never as innocent as they sound. Those were the kind of words people said before they set fire to everything. I crossed my arms, cautiously curious. All right. I've been thinking, she started, and right away, I knew I wasn't going to like where this was going. I want to restructure our marriage. Restructure? I repeated. Her tone was eerily calm, like she was delivering a quarterly report. Yes. I want more autonomy, financially, emotionally. I think it's healthier if we separate responsibilities entirely. No more shared accounts. No more asking me where I'm going or who I'm with. I'm not interested in being monitored or accountable. It hit me like a punch delivered with surgical precision. No rage, no mess, just cold intent. She wasn't asking for a separation. She was asking to rewrite the rules of our marriage on her terms while keeping the title of wife for convenience. I blinked. And this came to you when, exactly? I've been considering it for a while, she said, as if she were just now remembering to add it. I want us to operate as individuals. I need my space, my independence. My mind raced. 8 years of marriage. 2 house moves. A startup we built together. Her design business that I funded while cutting back on my own career. I'd let go of so much to hold things steady. And now she was standing there telling me she didn't want to be accountable. I said nothing. She seemed to expect pushback. Maybe even a meltdown. Her posture was already defensive, but I just stared at her for a long moment and said quietly, okay. Her expression didn't change much, but there was the faintest flicker of confusion, like she hadn't expected me to agree so easily. That was the first mistake she made, assuming I'd fight for a version of her that no longer existed. I went upstairs, took off my work clothes, and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence in the room felt heavier than usual. Downstairs, I could hear the sounds of cooking continue, pots clinking, the hum of the exhaust fan, her footsteps pacing the kitchen floor. I thought about how I used to feel lucky to come home to her. How, back in the early days, I'd text her from the car just to say I missed her laugh. I remembered the nights we stayed up talking about everything, dream vacations, owning a second property, growing old together with bad knees and matching lawn chairs. I remembered how she used to reach for my hand when we crossed streets, like she needed me close even in the safest places. Where did that woman go? She used to make me feel needed, not tolerated. The woman downstairs was someone else entirely. Like the years we spent building a life together were just data points on a timeline she was now revising. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there listening to her breathing, steady and careless, as if nothing had happened. And the more I thought, the more I realized this wasn't a betrayal. It was a declaration. She didn't just want new rules. She wanted power without responsibility, freedom without consequence. She didn't understand that the version of me who gave endlessly had been slowly dying. That every time she treated my support like an expectation, something inside me hardened. She thought she could change the rules without losing the game. But I wasn't going to beg for closeness, or dignity, or love. If she wanted autonomy, I'd give her the full experience. No warnings. Just absence. Let her feel what it's like to be truly independent. She didn't know it yet, but she'd already lost. She noticed it first when the water bill went unpaid. It was a small thing, the kind of oversight you usually fix with a sigh and an online payment. But it arrived in a bright yellow envelope marked Final Notice, and I caught the flicker of confusion cross her face when she opened it at the kitchen table. She stared at it a few seconds longer than necessary, then quietly slid it under a magazine stack like it might disappear if ignored. I didn't say a word. That had become the new rule, hers, not mine. Independence. No questions. No explanations. She hadn't yet realized that I was following it more faithfully than she ever expected. That week, I stopped picking up the groceries. I stopped filling her car's tank when it was low. The little things, laundry detergent, coffee filters, cat food, all vanished, one by one. She started asking if I'd forgotten to stop at the store, her tone light at first, almost teasing. I shrugged. Didn't know I was supposed to. Her brow creased slightly, but she didn't press. By the following Monday, her salon called to confirm an appointment I hadn't paid for. She called them back, tried to blame a mix-up with her card. But she knew. She knew I was stepping back, and it was starting to itch at her. She asked about it that evening half-heartedly, arms crossed as she leaned against the fridge. Have you stopped doing everything? I glanced at her, then back at the TV. Not everything. Just my share. My share too, apparently. You asked for that, I said. I'm respecting your boundaries. That word, respecting, landed harder than it should have. She frowned, as if trying to gauge whether I was mocking her. I wasn't. I was dead serious. She had redrawn the lines of our marriage, and now she was finding out how lonely those new lines really were. But I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't complain when her closet door jammed and she asked me to fix it. I just looked up from my coffee and said, "You'll figure it out." The cracks started to show about a week later. I overheard her on the phone with her best friend, Natalie, trying to sound upbeat. But there was something brittle in her voice, something stretched too thin. "No, it's not like we're fighting," she said. "He's just different lately." Quiet. There was a pause, then a chuckle that sounded forced. "No, I thought it's what I wanted to. But it's not. I don't know. It's weird now. Like I'm invisible." I didn't move. I let her words hang in the air, and I let her feel the weight of them. That night, I checked our joint investment accounts. Quietly and methodically, I began redirecting the funds, pulling my portion, restructuring my contributions, separating assets with surgical precision. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just making sure that if we were going to operate independently, she'd feel it financially too. That's when I called Marcus, our longtime financial advisor and one of the few people I still trusted. I told him everything. Not in dramatic detail, just the essentials. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "Do you want this to be reversible?" "No," I said. 2 days later, she opened her banking app in the middle of dinner and went pale. "What the hell?" she muttered, scrolling rapidly. "Why are the transfers frozen?" I kept eating. "Did you change the account?" I looked up. "You said you wanted your own finances." I figured I'd make it easier. Her fork hit the plate with a sharp clang. "You don't get to make decisions like that unilaterally." "Sure I do," I said calmly. "That's how independence works, remember?" For the first time in weeks, I saw panic in her eyes. Not full-blown fear. Just the quiet realization that things were moving beyond her control. That I wasn't just sulking or playing games. I was detaching. Completely. She went quiet after that. But later that night, I found her in the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone like she was looking for answers she didn't want to admit she needed. She didn't see me standing in the hallway. Or maybe she did, but didn't have the strength to speak. She called her cousin Danny the next morning. Danny and I had always had a complicated rapport, cordial, polite, distant. She was the kind of person who saw more than she said, which is probably why my wife had always kept her at arm's length. But this time, she came over in person. And what she said when my wife stepped out of the room caught me completely off guard. "You know she's been lying about some things, right?" Danny said quietly, sitting across from me on the couch. I looked at her, surprised. "Lying about what?" She hesitated, then leaned in, her voice low. "I think you should check the deed on the Oak Hill property. And the credit lines tied to your name." She stood up then, not waiting for my response. "Just do your homework. That's all I'm saying." And then she left, just like that. I sat there for a long time after she was gone, staring at nothing. Something was wrong. Worse than I thought. And if what Danny hinted at was even half true, then this wasn't just about a broken marriage. This was about betrayal. I spent the next morning poring through documents, my coffee going cold beside the laptop as I traced threads I should have noticed long ago. The Oak Hill property was in both our names, or so I'd thought. We had discussed it together, visited it together. I even remembered standing on the porch with her while she daydreamed aloud about turning it into a vacation rental. I had nodded, smiled, offered to handle the paperwork. But the records told a different story. The final deed was filed solely in her name. Not joint, not shared. And the mortgage? It was taken out using my credit as co-signer, but somehow, only she was listed as the property owner. I scrolled through the files slowly, the pit in my stomach growing heavier with each click. She'd used my signature on at least 2 forms that I didn't remember signing. I was sure of it. The dates didn't line up. One of them was filed while I was out of town on a conference. The realization hit in stages, denial first, then confusion, and finally, a cold, almost surgical sense of betrayal. This wasn't just her redefining our marriage. This was theft, wrapped in love notes and whispered lies. I printed everything out, highlighted the details, and slid it into a folder I tucked in my bag. For now, I said nothing. I wanted to be absolutely sure. I contacted Marcus again, asked him to run a full review of all our credit activity for the last 18 months. By evening, he called back, his voice tight. "There's a personal credit line in your name," he said, drawn against it 3 times. Jewelry, home furnishings, and something about a boutique travel concierge service. My voice was flat. "Did I authorize it?" "No," he said. "And that's not even the worst part." I waited. She took out a second card. Same line. "You never signed for it." I hung up and sat in the dark for a while, the weight of it all pressing down like wet cement. The whole time I'd been cutting back, downsizing my expenses, scaling back my contributions to fund what I thought was our shared life. She was creating her own private empire on my back. She didn't just want to change the rules. She'd already rewritten them behind my back. That night, she brought up counseling for the first time. Said it like it was a peace offering, a band-aid for everything unraveling between us. "Maybe we should see someone," she said, picking at her dinner. "A therapist." I looked at her, not responding, just observing. "I mean," she added, "it's obvious things have gotten tense." Tense. That word barely scratched the surface. But I nodded. "Sure. Book something." She looked relieved. As if my agreement meant I still cared. As if I was still the man she could manipulate with the promise of recovery. The next afternoon, I visited Danny. She didn't ask why I was there. Just opened the door and handed me a USB drive. "Everything I could dig up," she said. Emails. Financials. She didn't even bother clearing her cloud storage. Rookie move. I took it without a word. "She's been talking to a real estate lawyer," Danny added. "Named Halvorson. You'll want to check that name." I drove home and opened the files. Emails between her and Halvorson confirmed it. She was planning to liquidate Oak Hill. Sell it before the end of the quarter. And she was asking about transferring the funds to an offshore account. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Every doubt I'd had was gone now. Every flicker of guilt about pulling away. Every hesitation about letting her stand on her own, gone. She hadn't just stepped out of the marriage. She'd packed her bags on the way out, filled them with my assets, and planned to disappear before I even noticed the door closing. The rest of the week passed in silence between us. She was distant but measured, trying to stay calm, trying to keep the facade intact. I played along, smiled when needed, asked nothing, said even less. Until Friday. We were at a dinner with friends, a casual gathering at a rooftop bar downtown. She wore her confidence like a second skin, laughing, charming, talking about her design business like nothing else existed. I watched her from across the table, taking it all in. The fake smile. The performative interest in everyone else's stories. The way she brushed my hand off her back when I reached for her. That's when someone asked, "You two seem quiet lately. Everything good?" She laughed and glanced at me. "We're fine. Just recalibrating, right?" I smiled back. "Something like that." The others chuckled, clearly uncomfortable with the tension hanging in the air. But Danny, sitting beside her husband near the end of the table, didn't laugh. She looked at me, her expression unreadable, and raised her glass. "To recalibration," she said dryly. Later that night, back at home, my wife tried to initiate something physical. It was so sudden, so unlike her in recent months, that I knew instantly it wasn't desire, it was control. One last attempt to reassert whatever power she thought she still had over me. I pulled back gently. "Not tonight." She looked startled. "Why not?" "I'm just tired," I said. "You understand." For a moment, she looked like she might press. But she didn't. She just rolled over and turned off the lamp. And I lay there in the dark, the USB drive tucked inside the nightstand, the folder of printed records hidden in my briefcase, knowing I was days away from ending all of it. She thought she still had time to fix this. Thought a few therapy sessions and forced intimacy would patch the cracks she'd carved into our life. She didn't know. She was already standing on the edge. I waited until Monday morning. She had just poured her second cup of coffee and was scrolling through her emails at the kitchen counter, robe loosely tied, hair still damp from the shower. I stood in the doorway, folder in hand, watching her for a moment. The ease in her movements, the casual entitlement. It was like she didn't have a clue how close she was to the edge of a cliff. I set the folder down on the table in front of her. She looked up, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "What's this?" "Read it." She opened it, her hands suddenly slower, more cautious. Her eyes moved down the page, widening as she flipped through the documents, highlighted statements, property records, email transcripts, and bank activity logs. Page after page of secrets she thought were safe. When she looked up at me, her face had lost all color. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "Danny," I said simply. She thought I deserved to know. Her mouth opened like she wanted to deny it, to lie, but there was nothing left to hide. The evidence was too detailed, too thorough. Her lips moved, but no words came out. "You used my name to buy a property. You forged documents. You opened accounts and maxed out credit lines under my signature," I said, voice even low. "And you were planning to sell it and vanish with the money." "I wasn't," she started, but then stopped herself. Her voice cracked on the first syllable. "Don't," I said. "Don't insult both of us with that." She looked down, her hands shaking now, flipping back through the folder like she could erase what was printed there. "You always acted like I was controlling," I continued. "Like I was holding you back. But you were playing a game I didn't even know I was in." There was a long silence between us. Just the hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, and the shallow hitch of her breath. "What are you going to do?" she finally whispered. I stepped closer. "That depends. But I've already spoken to Marcus. The financial side is being handled." Her shoulders tensed. "You're going to ruin me." "No," I said. "You did that yourself." I left the house not long after, giving her space to process it, or panic, or both. I wasn't interested in watching her scramble. This wasn't about theatrics or revenge. It was about ending a game she thought she could win alone. By Tuesday, my lawyer had initiated the process. Quietly, cleanly. Emergency injunctions to freeze assets. Formal fraud notifications. Divorce filing drafted and prepped. She hadn't even gotten out of bed when the doorbell rang with the first official delivery. She tried to play innocent, answering the door in slippers, face scrubbed bare. But the moment she saw the courier, she knew. She didn't open the envelope, just stared at it like it might bite. That night, she called her mother. I overheard fragments from the hallway. Tears, denial, self-pity. Nothing about what she'd actually done. Just that I had turned on her, that I was cold, that she didn't understand what was happening. The next day, Danny texted me. "She's trying to pull the family sympathy card. I'm staying out of it. Just wanted you to know." And just like that, her fallback support was gone too. The real unraveling came later that week. I attended a design expo she was scheduled to present at. I didn't plan to interact. I only went because I wanted to see what she looked like when the floor beneath her started to cave in. She took the stage late, visibly shaken, stammering through her pitch. I watched from the back as one of the sponsors whispered to another, likely about the legal whispers already floating around. Reputation, influence, career, all beginning to fracture. I didn't say a word to her that day. I just left before she saw me. Because that wasn't the end. The end came a few nights later, when she tried to talk. We were in the living room. She was standing by the window, hands clasped together like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice so small it barely reached me. "A mistake," I repeated. "I got lost in everything. I felt like I needed control, like I was drowning." "You weren't drowning," I said. "You were driving the boat. And you aimed it right at the rocks." She sat down on the couch, like her legs had given out. "I didn't mean for it to get so far. But it did. I don't want to lose everything." I sat down across from her, calm, detached. "You already did." She reached for me, tentative, desperate. I pulled back. "Don't," I said. "You decided the terms. I'm just enforcing them." I stood, walked to the front door, and opened it. "You should go. Take some time. Figure out what you actually want. But don't expect to find me here when you come back." She didn't move at first. just stared at me like a stranger had taken my place. But eventually, she picked up her purse, stepped outside, and left. She hadn't just lost the marriage. She lost the safety net she assumed would always catch her. I didn't hear from her for 3 weeks. No texts. No calls. Not even one of those passive-aggressive emails she used to send when she wanted to sound composed but was seething underneath. Nothing. The silence was loud, but this time, it was mine. I had turned off the noise she once used to control everything. Guilt, charm, manipulation, promises she never meant to keep. And in that silence, I started to rebuild. It wasn't dramatic, no wild reinventions or new routines. Just stillness. Cleaning out the closet she used to fill with overpriced outfits, canceling subscriptions to things I never used but always paid for. I started walking after work, cooking meals I actually liked, fixing the things in the house that had waited too long for attention. Life became functional again. Clean. Uncluttered. The lawyer handled most of it. The fraud documentation Danny helped me gather had teeth, strong enough to pressure her into a full confession and mediation, which spared us both a court circus. But the financial damage she'd done wasn't going to vanish. Her assets were frozen. My credit would take years to recover. Still, the weight of her being gone made every hit feel like a bruise instead of a wound. When she finally reached out, it wasn't to fight. It was to beg. She showed up at my office one rainy Thursday afternoon, soaked from the storm and looking nothing like the woman who once strutted through luxury boutiques with my cards in her wallet and my name on her lips. She looked small, deflated. I stepped outside before security could intervene. She looked up at me with wide, tired eyes. "I just want 5 minutes," she said. I nodded and motioned her to a bench under the awning. She didn't speak right away, just sat there, wringing her hands like a child waiting for punishment. "I've lost everything," she whispered. I said nothing. "My family doesn't talk to me. My clients dropped me. I had to move back in with my sister." Still, I waited. "You were right. About all of it." Finally, I spoke. "And what do you want from me now?" She looked down. "I don't know. Maybe just not to hate me." "I don't hate you," I said. "I don't feel anything anymore. And that's worse." She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer but hoped to be wrong. "I thought I could control everything," she said. "I thought if I stayed ahead of you, I'd never have to face how far I'd gone. But then you stopped chasing, and I started falling." Her voice cracked, but I didn't offer her comfort. That part of me was gone. Dead. And even if it hadn't been, she didn't deserve it. She stood up after a while, wiping her eyes. "Goodbye," she said, quietly. "Goodbye," I replied. That was the last time I saw her. The divorce finalized 2 months later. She walked away with nothing but the clothes she hadn't already sold and the shame she tried to hide behind for too long. I walked away lighter. Not unscathed, but stronger. Danny and I stayed in touch. Not often, but enough. She apologized once for waiting so long to tell me the truth. I told her not to carry it. That we all wake up too late sometimes. But me? I wasn't sleeping anymore. I was wide awake. The man she thought would beg, who'd always wait, always forgive, always bend, he was gone. In his place stood someone who didn't just survive what she did. He learned from it. And in the end, that was the only revenge I ever needed. Let her sit in the ashes she lit herself. I didn't need to burn her world down. She'd already done it for me.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.